Now, just going back on these guys that are looking for a first-time company to advise, or how to become a good advisor, or whatever that may be, compensation-wise for them, obviously there's plenty of upside for them in terms of experience, networking, and getting kind of a perspective that they never had from where they once were. Compensation-wise, when they're just starting out, would you recommend that they start as a volunteer and go from there, or do you think it's justified?
I think you start out as a volunteer and kind of get the experience that way. I mean, and you can do some small consulting projects, but stay in your area of expertise. You can't be a generalist if you are kind of a mid-level manager. And that's not knocking it. You've learned a great deal as a mid-level manager. Kind of assess what your skills you've developed over the years, and then use those things as your service levels that you're going to go after. I'm really strong on human resources or whatever. You can help people, help companies that are in the hiring mode, or they've got a particular set of problems with, how the organization's being managed or what have you. Everybody who's been in business for an extended period of time has built up an expertise. Question is to, truly evaluate what that is, and then apply it to small companies.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. So if they're going in for compensation, it's all the wrong reasons, is what you're saying in a way. If that's the primary driver there in the beginning.
They're trying to make some money. I mean, it's a right reason for them. What it does do is if you're not giving value, what it does is it turns the entrepreneur off to advisors for the future.
Right.
Because I already did that, and I wasted $10,000 on this guy who was around for several months and didn't do anything except look at my watch and tell me what time it was.
Yeah. Sure. So like you said, a good starting point would be volunteer first, get your value determined, and then talk compensation when it's time.
Yeah,
once that's
absolutely.
been done.
And it'll be, what I always, when I'm mentoring folks, when I'm doing it for free, and I've got, as I said, I always have 4 or 5 companies that do it. I tell them, I say, look, I do this for money, but don't worry about that. If we're reaching a point where I'm providing advice to you on such a regular basis or in such depth that I think it's probably time to formalize it, I'll let you know that.
Right.
You'll get that feeling, but it is, especially with small business, it's to try to get as much broad-based experience across a lot of businesses as quickly as you can. That's why I suggest the SCORE volunteer, because you will get to see bunches of them, because they need volunteers, and most of those guys who do that are retired guys who are trying to help, and they do invariably.
Good. Excellent. Just last thing that I've got here is just around the time requirements. I've heard certainly plenty of different stories where it's monthly meetings or sometimes weekly, even quarterly, obviously, is pretty standard for a lot of boards. But what do you recommend for a time requirement? And what do you currently, in your experience, what do you see as the most effective kind of time intervals for these meetings?
It's hard to really pigeonhole that. Everybody's like, if it's simply, if you're part of an advisory board, you're probably not going to meet more often than once a month. Although, as the advisory board's getting underway, you might find that it's beneficial to meet weekly to start with, or and then fall back into a monthly kind of a thing. It depends on, much depends on whether there's compensation or you're doing it pro bono. If there's compensation, you want to be, it's got to be very, very much structured. In my advisory deals, in the straight down the center of the fairway advisory deals, it has two parts to it. One is I go in and I do a formal assessment, review and assessment of the company, so that I really understand where they are. I ask hard questions of folks, and then I sit down with them and say, guys, here's what I found. Here's some recommendations. Let's put a plan together to fix it, and I'll help you manage that. And then I just fall back into an advisory capacity and act as a behind-the-scenes, whisper in their ear, here's how to get this done. So what I identify is, it's, in simplest terms, you can call it a SWOT analysis, but it's way more than that. But in any event, that's kind of the way I operate, and that's what works for me. Because if you're going to charge them money, you don't just want to sit from on high. You really want to get your hands dirty. You want to get into the business and understand it. Then you can really provide the kind of in-depth advice, that they need. And so then typically what I do is I fall back to this advisory, and then when that's over, when they've kind of implemented all the recommendations I've made, I will then fall into, I might suggest that they form an advisory board, and I typically will help them form it. I'll bring in people I know that I respect and say, this guy can really help you, especially here, like on the financial side, or this guy's the best marketing guy I know. You need to get into social media. He's the guy. Right.
Great. Excellent. Well, Lonnie, I certainly appreciate your advice here as a kind of an advisor to advisors.
I think it's a great business concept, Bill. I really do.
Yeah. Well, certainly appreciate your support on that. Is there anything else that you want to comment on before we wrap this up, or?
No, I don't think so. Unless you have other questions, I think, as I said, I think this is something that I'm really interested to see how this materializes, because I think it's got some legs.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we've come across a lot of, let's say, first-time advisors, and certainly lots of startups and small companies, a lot of franchise companies, and I think that traditionally on the company side, they don't really see or recognize the value of advisory boards. So there's a bit of an educational element there, and in doing so, now we have plenty of first-time advisors who are certainly going to be interested in hearing some of your advice, and I'm sure I'll direct them your way.
Here's a thought for you. I mean, this might be something. This might be something to do. Is hold an advisor's boot camp.
Yeah.
Where you come in and say, hey, here's what this means when you're going to do this stuff. Here's the different flavors that you might run up against, and just to kind of give them a sense of that. And
that makes sense.
You might do the same thing for entrepreneurs. I mean, maybe it's a webinar, and you might do the same thing for entrepreneurs and say, here's how you can maximize what you can get out of an advisory role somebody might play.
Great concept.
So
great concept. I think we'll have to keep talking more about that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, again, Lonnie, I certainly appreciate your time. We're going to wrap this up now. I'm just going to shut down the recording here, and stay with me. I'll come back to you in a second.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks again.
Thanks for listening. We hope you found some value from the interview. For more information about how BoardMyBiz.com can help you find companies to advise, please visit our website at BoardMyBiz.com. That's www.boardmybiz.com.